Okay.
Today we're interviewing Roger and Carroll Schmidt, who have been longtime Cass County residents, and their families have been longtime Cass County residents. And we're going to let them just tell a little bit about their family history and how they got to Plattsmouth.
Of course, there it goes.
Oh, and today is September 10th,
Yeah,
2020.
2024.
yeah.
Okay, guys, I remember Fritz and Anna. Tell me about them.
Well, I think
And who are they?
Roger might know the history better than I do of when Grandpa Fritz came to this country.
He came here in 1906 from Königsberg, Germany.
And what brought him here?
Well, the Weisses, not Art Weiss, to be one of the Weiss brothers, was in Germany also. And his wife was pregnant, and she had the child before they were going to make their journey to Plattsmouth. And you couldn't take a child on that voyage, they had to be a year old. And Fritz was only 15 at the time. But they knew each other, so Fritz wanted to come to the United States, so he gave him his ticket, or her ticket, and they came over here together, which Martin Steppet was already here, and Martin Steppet would be Fritz's uncle. And so he lived with Martin Steppet for a while until he got old enough and helped farm. And then he bought the home place there from
Wait, what? George Bourne?
George Bourne. He bought it from George Bourne on a land contract.
On a land contract.
And then somehow he made it to Florence in Omaha, North Omaha, and he married Annie Royce, which was Royce.
Who already lived here?
Yeah, and she was born in the United States.
Okay.
But they had a truck farm, and somehow, I don't know, through chivalry to going on a train, I don't know how they met.
We're trying
Because
to
they were
figure
from
it out.
North Omaha, and this was in 1915, so there wasn't a lot of cars or
Yeah.
vehicles around at that time. So we just had the wonders because we never researched that, and everybody that is not.
So you're
wrong.
thinking that he had a truck farm and maybe he took things to South Omaha to sell?
That's what we're guessing.
Yeah.
You
Grandpa
said
Fritz,
Florence, right?
he used to
Florence,
love
Omaha.
fruits, fruit trees, and he planted fruit trees out of the farm, and so I know he liked fruit, and we were suspect that, and I know that Grandma's family, Annie, sent off from their truck car to South Omaha Fruit Market. That was the step, and we think that might be where they met.
Sure.
But she was from a large family. I think there was 10 or 12 kids in that
Yeah.
family
So
also.
there were 6 sisters, I think, and 1 brother, and then 2 died. There was an 8, I think, 8 sisters, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How many acres did he buy at the beginning and did he add?
207 acres.
And it stayed that way or?
Yeah, that stayed that way through all his lifetime.
Okay.
And when you said the home place, where you grew up,
Yeah.
you boys
Yeah.
grew up.
Yeah.
At Cullum.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then their child was
Dorothy.
Dorothea.
Yeah.
And how did she meet Emo?
And she was born, what, 1917, wasn't it? Yeah,
Mhm.
1917.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's a convoluted story. So, Fritz had a brother by the name of Martin, right, that was still living in Germany.
Oh.
And Albert Schmidt was Emil's dad, and he was still in Germany. And then Albert had a sister who married Martin Seamanite. Fritz writes Martin Seamanite a letter saying, do you know of anybody that would want to come to the United States and work for me? She says, yes, I have a nephew that would like to come. And that was Emil. So Fritz actually sent for Emil
Okay.
and brought him here as a farmhand. And then he worked for Fritz for passage and room and board, and then he worked at the Ford Motor plant at the same time. It was the 1930s.
So did they have to have a sponsor to come to the United
Yes.
States? And
Yeah,
so
Fritz sponsored
Fritz was
it.
his sponsor?
Yeah, there's an affidavit from the United States of America.
Emil, my dad,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so Fritz sponsored it.
And Dorothea's maiden name was
Seamanite.
Simnite.
Was she an only child?
Yes.
She was an only child, okay.
And-
So then they farmed?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so Emil came here and worked at Ford Motor Company and for Fritz for
Yeah.
a number of years.
Yeah.
But then Dorothy was only 13 at the time.
Oh,
So Emil was 10 years older than her. So then he moved to Chicago and they went to the German American Club, him and his brother Fritz. He had a brother that came over with him.
Immigrated here together.
oh.
And so then they ended up in Chicago, and that's where Dad learned how to dance and really speak English well.
Yeah. And first of all, both Fritz and Emil, my dad, worked for Armour. They were immigrants that worked for the packing plant, meat packing plant.
Mhm.
And they were both beef luggers. They'd
Oh,
throw a
yeah.
quarter of beef over their shoulder and then take it out to a rail car. Usually at that time, it was a refrigerated rail cars, not trucks. And they hang it on a hook. And then that's how they got to Chicago, because they wanted, I don't know why they wanted to go to Chicago, but somehow they both wanted to go to Chicago. So Armour had a plant in Chicago, packing plant in Chicago. And so they just moved out there and worked for Armour there. And like Roger said, Dad used to work at nights at the German American Club. That's why I learned how to speak English.
Oh, sure.
And that's about all I know about that. You want to tell about
Then
the
they-
story about
then they went-
the shotgun deal, or?
No, then they went, not yet, but then they went to, then he came back after that, and that's when Mom and him started dating.
So how much older was Emil than Dorothea?
10 years.
I was just gonna say, there must have been some years in between.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if we back this story up a little bit, so when Fritz and Annie were married and Dorothy was only 10 or 12 years old, they had a farm worker there that was also a German immigrant. And Fritz had sold a bunch of cattle at the stockyards, and this guy thought that they had all this money in the house. So he was gonna rob them. And so he asked Fritz to borrow a shotgun because he wanted to go hunting. So Fritz gave him a shotgun and shells and everything. Well, that night it was a storm, so the guy came to the window of their bedroom and tried to shoot them both in bed together. And he shot right in between them, hit Annie, and didn't hit Fritz.
No, it didn't hit Annie there. It
Yeah,
hit
yeah,
Annie.
it did.
No, it hit her in that kitchen.
Yes, there too, but he hit her there also. Anyway, Fritz jumped out of bed and went out of the window, and Annie went to the kitchen, and Dorothy hid her underneath the bed, and she went to the kitchen, and he was there pointing the gun at her, and she was begging him not to shoot her again. And he did shoot her up in the shoulder and took part of her shoulder out. And at the same time, she had dialed Otto Paterite on the phone.
Which was half a mile away.
Yeah.
Or a mile.
That was the days of party line. So the line, she dropped the phone and she was begging him not to kill her. Of course,
Yeah.
Otto recognized who it was, called the sheriff, and he went down there, and for some reason, he didn't kill her. I don't know why. He left.
So he left before the sheriff got there?
Yes, and then he went down in the bottom down there, and supposedly took some poison and I don't know what all.
Strychnine, supposedly had a bottle of strychnine in his hand and hid in a haystack, thinking that they would give up on him because he was gonna die anyway, but he didn't, they didn't buy that.
So, anyway, they deported him. His name was Oshuffle. And,
John Oshkosh,
but
yeah.
he wasn't related to the.
He was not relation.
You can do a little bit of research on that story. I've
It's
seen
in
the
the
story
World
in the Lincoln Star paper.
Oh,
When was the event? Do you know?
well, if Dorothea was 10 or so, it would have been,
When the shotgun
it'd
deal
been about
happened.
1930.
Yeah,
1929, I think it was, wasn't it? Or was it 30?
well, 13 and she was born 17, so that'd be 30.
Yeah,
29 or 30.
yeah.
So Anna recovered from her,
Yeah, she
Wounds.
had, part of her shoulder was always missing, but yeah, she recovered off of it and
She had buckshot in her neck all the time. When she died, she still had buckshot in her neck.
oh my,
but anyway, that happened and then, so now we're gonna move forward again. Now we're back to Dorothy and Emil again.
yeah.
And so then they got married and
In 1939, they got
yeah,
married.
they got married in 39, June of 39. And then they had Carol and Mary.
Yeah.
Carol was born in 40.
Carol, what, you were born in 40?
In 70, June 7th, 1940, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary was 3 years younger.
3? Okay,
43, I think.
Okay.
43. February 43.
Then
and
they
the two
waited-
little guys were
then they
born
waited,
when?
13 years to have Alan. He was born in 54. And then I was born in 55.
55,
So it's like two
A
different
year and a
families.
half, year and a half later.
yeah.
Always used to talk about,
So my mom was an only child, and she never wanted to raise another child alone. That was the
Mhm.
reason for 2 kids.
Oh, so after she had Ellen, then she got busy to have you, so he'd have a companion. And you guys were great companions.
Everybody thought we were the twins.
Yes.
Never was any twins,
Yeah.
but because we were just the same size, and we're a year and a half apart.
So then Emil farmed all those years,
yeah,
or?
he worked for the Ford company. He used to, right after he moved back from Chicago back here, worked for Grandpa, or Chris for a while. He wanted, because Ford Motor Company was paying like $10 a day, which was big money back then. And he was,
Well,
it
it
was
was only
like
three.
red sand on the cars and come out of Ford.
It was only 3.
Huh?
$3 a day, not 10.
Was it 3?
Yeah,
Okay.
10 would be like.
I was only 3. This
Farm
was-
wages were $1
Yeah.
a day.
So anyway, but he hitchhiked from the farmstead, which you know where's that,
Uh-huh.
all the way right down to about where we're at right now. He hitchhiked to Oriapolis and then catch a ride, on the
Oh,
ride in Omaha,
yeah, that'd be a hike.
into the Ford plant. In 1932, I know it was 1932 because I lived through 32 Fords and he was worked on
Oh,
them. He was in the finishing department where they wet sand on the engine, the paint before they pinstriped.
Where was the Ford?
Right.
16th Street,
Yeah.
North 16th Street.
Oh, no.
Right where you see the big, there's a water
Yeah.
tower on top of that building, that's it. That used to say Ford on it. Then it's-
so how long did he do that?
Oh.
Till well after
Yeah,
I
a couple
think
they were
years.
married?
Well,
No, not that.
Not
long.
till after they were married.
we worked there in 32, so he's hitchhiking. I think the drought, there was a big drought from 32 to 34 through this whole area. And Grandpa Fritz, where the farmstead is at, there was about 40 acres on the bottom where the lake's at now, was, they called it sub-irrigated. I mean, because he had about 40 acres of corn that made it through the drought because, and he shocked it all, which meant, anyway, he bought, I think it was 100 cows for like 10 cents a pound, or like, we'll say $10 a pin, about. And they were all pregnant cows. And that spring, then it started raining and broke the drought. But he had enough feed to get them through the winter. And he sold them, he sold them cows for, I think, $110, wasn't it, $120 a
I
head.
don't remember.
So he made some
So I
money.
made a lot of money for, and that's why I paid for the farm.
So by that time the farm was paid for, he bought it on a land contract?
I don't exactly, here's what I can remember about it. He bought that farm from anyway, I don't know if George Warren who owned it, but anyway, he borrowed $30,000 from George Bourne, and that's what he paid for the farm. And during the Depression, it was an open-ended note, like a call note. So George Bourne come to him and said, "Fritz, I want my money." And obviously Grandpa didn't have the $30,000 worth of cash, or the $30,000. So across about straight west of the farm, there was another farm that was owned by the Helflickers. And Julius Helflicker was the landowner of that farm, and his daughter and his son lived on the farm, but that was afterwards, I guess. But anyway, he borrowed the 30 grand from Julius Helflicker to pay George Bourne off.
Now he's,
And
now
so-
he's still in
So
debt.
he paid George Bourne off, and the story goes, that I heard anyway, George Bourne went to the bank and took the $30,000 in the bank and deposited it, and he told one of the bankers at that time, probably one of the Snyders, "There's more money in the country than I thought there was."
Yeah,
But George Bourne was trying to Schneider him out of the farm.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
but-
pay up or I'll take it, yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, didn't.
So I'm wondering what kind of equipment Fritz had. Did he have horses?
The whole horse.
Yeah.
They pulled plows with horses?
Oh, yeah.
The first, when I was still, maybe that tall, I don't know. But Lady was one of the horses. We had two Clydesdales, and they pulled a feed wagon
Wow.
in the bunks where they fed the cattle at. And they're two big old Clydesdales, and they fed the cattle with the horses before tractors. The first tractor I remember was an F-20, and I don't know. Then he bought Dad bought an age tractor from Paintlands in about 47 or 48, 49, right in there,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was about a 20 horsepower tractor. And about 2 years later, we bought an M tractor, which was about a 30 horsepower tractor or something. Anyway, and that's what farming went from horses to machinery.
Yes, right.
I'd say about 1948 or 50, right in there.
Now tell me about Dorothea's cake business. I know, when did she start that cake business? I know she had a little cake house, I've been there.
Yeah.
Those two.
Oh, she probably started that about 1965, 66,
But she-
somewhere in there.
Oh, I thought it was earlier than that, okay.
Well, she always
She's
dabbled in
teaching.
it, but she was teaching
Yeah.
school full-time, and she she graduated from college like in 1968. And she graduated from high school and went to Tarkio College, got a teaching certificate after, I think,
2 years.
2 years.
Mhm.
But then she had to go to class every year to keep up her teaching certificate. And so she takes so many hours, just the minimum to qualify for the
Right.
next year. And so she did eventually graduate from college, but in between that time is when she developed the skill of baking cake
Baking cakes, yeah.
and the artistry behind it and
Yeah,
how to do all.
she was very good at it,
Yeah,
very.
but that was all, my grandmother was a great baker, great cook, and so my mom picked all that stuff up and then, carried it on, and
Yeah.
she was a scratch cook.
And you guys delivered the cakes?
Oh, yeah.
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 I did most of that.
Yeah.
I remember, as Sandra said, coming to pick up a cake or talk to Dorothea about what I wanted. And it was that cake house. Now that cake house, was that your grandparents' house?
Yeah.
What, the story on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was built back in 1950 or so.
Yeah.
Basically, that's
It's actually a converted garage.
Oh,
And that little house right next to it was where Annie and Fritz lived, Grandpa and Grandma. And Grandma was a very skilled baker, baking pastries and breads and stuff like that. And Grandma would do, she'd always, when I was probably 10 or 12 years old, this probably had a lot to do with my slugging my arteries up, and we'd go out and do some chores early, and then we'd have bacon and eggs before we went out in a black old van.
Big breakfast,
Yeah.
yeah.
Went out and do some chores and come back in, and Dad would fry that Grandma would make pumpernickel bread. It was a real hard, it was rye bread.
Yeah.
Anyway. And Dad would fry that pumpernickel bread in that bacon grease. And then we'd salt it, and it's good.
Yeah. Did Dorothy always taught at Cullum School?
not always. She taught a long time at Cullum School, but after Cullum School closed, she taught in two other school districts. One at the Becker School, which I don't know what district that would be.
That was
That's
District 40 at that
40,
time,
yeah.
huh?
40, that's our school, I think, is it 41 or 42?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should,
Oh, out at the Meisinger farm? Okay.
well,
Then she also taught on 42nd Street, I think it is, where you go down 60th, you know where, the 4 Mile Creek is right in there, and that would be,
Cottonwood School, I think they called it, didn't they? Oh, no, that wasn't it either.
well, it would be where Dwayne Himes' kids went to school. She taught Diane and Jim, I know.
Always elementary?
Yes.
Yeah, Dwayne Himes, shoulders.
So whatever district that would be, I don't recall what it was,
Okay.
but that was the last job she taught at.
And then
got
after
paid
she,
$7,200, the highest money she ever got paid teaching school.
yeah, my first year of teaching, my yearly salary was $6,000.
Yeah.
Well, my first year was 2,900, I think.
For the year?
well,
For the
mine
year.
Oh, my.
2,700.
We're gonna hire a bid.
Huh?
I thought mine was 2,700.
No.
Maybe it
Oh,
was.
boy.
Well, there wasn't much anyway.
No, it wasn't.
The teacher's retirement wasn't very much either, was it?
But now teacher retirement is good.
But in those, early
Those
on
days it wasn't.
No, I don't think it was. But I will say that the state of Nebraska has a good
But Mom,
retirement and good insurance also.
but Mom
How
taught
many
Roger
different-
and Alan
Oh,
at that District 3, she taught both of them.
Yeah, she taught us all 8 grades of school.
What was your question, Roger?
How many different tax districts are in Cass County? There's something like
There were
that.
102 rural schools at one time,
no,
Yeah.
school
102.
districts.
and now there are none.
There
Yeah.
were 100 school districts. I think that includes.
In Cass County?
Yes, in Cass County.
103 school districts.
Yeah, so there
or
was,
two.
in those
But
days,
not
there was
just
one
rural.
about every couple miles, because kids
Sure.
had to walk to
You
school.
had to walk to school,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And
And so now the museum is putting up a sign, even though most of the schools are not there, the actual building.
Yeah.
They're putting up a sign as the site where there was a rural school. So, I don't know, they've put up about 40 of them. There's still a lot of them that,
you know, that's like the King Corn Carnivals kind of died off because of, you know, all those school districts, they had floats.
Yes,
They brought people
yes.
to town. It was kind of the big event of the year. I remember my mom used to just
oh, yes.
dwell over making a float and having all those
In
kids.
fact, that's how she met.
Yeah.
Yeah, the museum has pictures of your mother's floats. I remember seeing some of
And
them.
she that's how she met Howard Buffett, which was Warren Buffett's father. He was a congressman, 5th district congressman. And so Mom communicated back and forth by mail. there's a bunch, we got.
Well, she never met a stranger, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so anyway, Mom and Dad got invited to Warren Buffett's wedding when he got married.
Oh,
So there's that relationship. And they stayed. Mom used to have lunch every couple months or something with Leela, which was Howard Buffett's, Warren's mother.
okay.
And every once in a while they'd have lunch together.
I believe that.
And I asked Mom, because Warren's a Democrat, and Howard was a real, he was a Republican anyway. She asked him how come Warren's a Democrat, and she asked Leela, and it's something about, I really don't know the exact deal, but it was something about the party done something to his dad.
Oh,
The Republican Party did something.
did something he didn't like.
Yeah, something, I don't know what
Yeah.
it even was, but that's what.
Hmm,
And so Warren's been a Democrat ever since that time.
yeah, he's a staunch Democrat.
Yeah,
I remember your mom and dad dancing at weddings.
yeah, oh, yeah.
I can't remember where it would be, but I know I've seen them dancing on several occasions.
I remember some
Well, they went
event,
to every event, when my mom would bake those cakes,
Then they'd
she
stay.
would insist on cutting the cake because no one knew how to cut the cake and the cake would fall apart, so she'd always have a wet knife and, in hot water, and she'd slice all the cakes because
Yeah.
she wanted it to look perfect on the plate. And so she would sort of insist on, or ask, hey, can I stay and cut the cake?
Right.
Because, it'll look a lot better.
And you
That's
were
a lot.
talking about your mom being such a good cook. At one time, we had an ABWA organization here in town,
Yeah.
and I belonged, and so did
Yeah.
she. And periodically, she would have the whole group out to
Yeah.
her house, your house, for dinner, for our evening
My mother
meal
was,
and meeting.
my mother wasn't much of a housekeeper, but she never slept. And she would feed all these,
Busy and creating.
every stranger that came in the door, she'd
Feed
feed
them.
them
Yeah.
She always
Have
had
coffee for
wonderful
them,
meals for us.
or do whatever. She was just,
And they're, the Vic store and Marvin Peter Wright, and they'd come in for coffee all the time. And when we were-
that was a daily event.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a daily, yeah.
well, I remember when I came on the scene, I think Fred and I were dating, Dorothea would invite Hugo and Fred down for
Yeah.
potato pancakes.
Yeah, she loved
Yeah.
to do that, yeah.
She has a special recipe.
And how old was your mother when she was killed?
At
75.
75. Yeah, I remember that incident.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, you two have done very well with your lives also. Carol, tell me about your business. You did the fertilizing business and later
Well, I started in
retired.
about 1960. How I kind of got started into it was, I know it was, Merritt Beach was open, and I was getting fertilizer from a Weeping Water Co-op, 1,000-gallon tank. And I was using my dad's tractor and putting side dressing fertilizer. And I got to thinking about, co-op's making all the money on the fertilizer, and I'm out here, and all my buddies are at the beach, So I said, so sometime right in there, I went to Allied Chemical, and they were right across the river. And I said, what do I need to do to become a dealer? And they sent a guy out to meet me at the farm. His name was J.P. Dawson. And I had to buy a tank, an anhydrous tank. I did. And then we used to go and fill them tanks up, even to take trailers and fill them up at Allied, with the little tanks, And that was, at that time, I think I had about 30 or 40 of those 1,000-gallon wagons, And first, we'd the Heim brothers, Jerry Heim and Dwayne Heim and myself, we'd go put fertilize customers all the way to Louisville and, you know, Springfield in that area, and all around Cass County. So then, after the fertilizer, we started growing on them tanks, and I started selling tanks and delivering tanks of fertilizer. Everybody started buying their own, or pulling their own tank, own chisels, putting it in. So we delivered the tanks, and then I met him. In fact, he was here. I met him here again a few days ago. But anyway, he was local. And you might have went to school with him. Leroy Kelsey. Remember Leroy?
He was in
Kelsey?
my class in school.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, he was
Their sales guy.
a salesman for
Oh, okay.
for Allied Chemical, and I saw him just about 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I still remember his phone number: 60402-393-9658.
So Leroy was in town? I thought he lived,
He lived in Arizona, but he's back in town with
Yeah, no.
his son. His wife's got some trouble. I don't know what.
oh,
So
I wasn't aware of
They're
that.
back here now
Yeah, they're back here.
because his son lives in Omaha.
Okay,
So
I haven't talked to him
his
for a
son lives in
while.
Omaha.
Yeah.
But Marvin Wiles had him down. We all went to lunch to Country Bar.
Okay,
And Marvin and his crew and Leroy, because they all have a relationship. for
yeah, old
years.
friend.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was before child labor, you know.
Yeah.
My
And-
brother Alan and I were pulling one of those tanks and rolled it over.
Yeah, and you were
I was
only how old?
14 and my
Yeah.
brother was 16. I said, if that happened today,
I'd be in jail.
Yeah,
child endangerment.
yeah, that would be
It would
dangerous.
be, I mean, it would have been,
Sure,
Yeah.
you know, let two youngsters off pulling the tank with a pickup, and they rolled it going down the hill right by Albert Ulrich's on 66. And he's got a big gash over there, almost
oh,
bled to death before he got up there, anyway.
you subjected your little brother to that.
Albert Ulrich saved my life.
Oh, yeah?
Mhm. Put a tourniquet on my.
Put a tourniquet on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, Albert was Fred's dad?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
But,
That's right where it happened. Right
Albert
in front of the
Rosemary.
driveway.
yeah.
yeah.
Rosemary was a Snyder to begin with, you know.
Well,
But
just
when
tell
you
us,
quit pulling the tanks, then afterwards, you know, now I'm an adult, I'm still pulling the tanks. Now I don't only pull one of them, I pull two
Okay.
of
Bigger
them.
ones, oh, bigger.
Then they went like this down the road.
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your car racing days.
Well,
How many cars did you end up having at one time or another?
oh, I mean, different ones. I had a 41 Willys, 57 Chevy, and a 49 English Ford Anglia.
The Anglia, yeah.
And that was about, you know, I was kind of big into that, you know, racing. I was one of the guys that really had the need for speed. And I had a 60, the fastest street car I ever had was I had a 65 Corvette that I bought from a guy in Lincoln. And it was almost new, it was new, but a guy had I don't know how, but the one front fender was almost complete. I had it repaired, and then I drove it around, but anyway, that was about,
And you did the drag racing thing?
oh yeah. And your husband Bill
Yes,
was involved with one of the cars.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that was the Anglia, and then Bill and Gary Morris. I remember which one bought the 32 Ford and the other one bought the engine. Do you remember, Bill?
I bought the 32 and Gary had the engine.
Okay, so Gary bought the engine out of the 57 Chevy I built, and Bill bought the 32 Ford.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
a guy by the name of Freeman, Freeman owned that 32. You bought it from?
Yeah, Freeman.
Yeah, the last name was Freeman anyway.
How many
Right.
years were you into that, do you think?
Well, I don't know, them guys, they won every year for a couple of years. And that little solid gearbox behind that engine. And you never got beat until the clutch wore out, didn't it? Or the clutch bearing, throw bearing got burned through the clutch plate, I think, the throw, or anyway. So that was the end of that, and then I've started through that 41 Willys, and Bill drove, and then that was a 41 Buick, I mean, a Studebaker you had with it, yeah. Anyway,
Where
Yeah.
did this take place, Carol? You were drag racing or a track? Where was the track?
oh,
Irvington.
sometimes we went before
Irvington.
Cornhusker, it was Irvington.
Irvington's what I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
growing up, yeah,
Irvington,
yeah.
Then
Yeah.
Cornhusker, and they traveled around all
Did you take it to Indianapolis once?
how did you took 2 cars down, I took the Willys down there, and no win there. I took the A-Way down there, no win there either, but anyway, went down there. And, yeah, I had the need for speed, I guess, that was, now I got a 57 Chevy Nomad back in Arizona, but it's not a race car, but it's a Nomads. We only built them in 3 years, 55, 6, and 7, and it's a classic custom car. It's, it's got, I don't know what to tell you about it. It's just
Yeah, fun stuff.
yeah, fun stuff. But it's sitting in the garage right now over here, and I put vice grips on the rollers in the garage floor, so while we're going, so nobody could get in from the outside.
Oh, interesting.
And somebody couldn't steal it.
Somebody knows what you've got in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the neighborhood knows, but anyway, because it's got it, even though it's a classic car, and you wouldn't know what it is, but it's an LS7 Chevy, and it's a little over 600 horsepower.
Oh,
And it just, you hit it, and it don't quit spinning the tires until it gets to about 60. Just smoke everywhere, so it's got plenty of.
Wow. Well, you're still into it then.
Oh yeah, I still like this. I still got that's about that.
To carry on with that, I have a story to tell about Bill.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I had a Vega that I put a V8 in. It had a 4-cylinder in it originally, put a V8 in it. Hopped it all up. So it's King Corn Carnival time, and I was about 18, 19 years old. Of course, I looked like I was 14 or younger. So I came to town. I stopped on Highway 66 to cross 75, and so I gave her hell all the way through the intersection, all the way around the corner, past the state shop, and then got down by your house.
By our house.
Yeah, and Bill's out mowing the yard. Of course, I'm all cleaned up, and he's just gotten off of work, and he's got a grease rag in the back of his pants, and he's got his uniform on. And so he looked over and smiled, so I pulled in the driveway, and I opened up the hood, and he's in there looking everything over. Well, I didn't know the state patrolman was up there pumping gas, putting it in his car at the state shop. So he come pulling down and pulls in the driveway and starts giving him hell because he doesn't think I'm old enough to drive.
I don't know this story.
Yeah, so he didn't write me off, but he said, if I was you, I'd leave this car right here. Don't drive downtown.
And Bill said, I will.
Yeah. Remember that, Bill?
Yeah.
It was fun.
So tell us about this enterprise. How did you get started in this?
Oh, I was mechanicking down at Sharp's junkyard, and I had a business. I had 2 or 3 guys working for me, and we worked on farm machinery and pickups and farm trucks and about anything that came in the door. Well, I'm also helping this older gentleman that was my age now, and he had 4 semis that he ran in Omaha and with Hill Brothers. Well, Pete Hill graduated from Plattsmouth High School, and Pete Hill always liked guys from Plattsmouth, and he'd lease trucks on from guys. So Dick Seidlitz and Bill Seidlitz were 2 brothers that also grew up with Pete Hill, and so they all had trucks leased on with him. Well, Dick Seidlitz I helped him on the weekends change tires and put springs in and do all this stuff. So then he wanted to retire and move to Arkansas. He said, "You need to buy these trucks from me." And I said, "I don't have any money." And he said, "You don't need any money." He said, "I'm going to sell them to you on a land contract and blah, blah, blah." So that's how that started out.
Yeah.
And so then, as a few years went by and I got a little bit of meat on my bones and things started going pretty well for me, and I was buying more trucks and leasing them and doing this and that. And then, and that was in '89. In 1994, Mike Bynes and I partnered up and started the tank line. And Mike knew everybody in the trucking business, in the trucking world, that had to do with Cargill and a lot of those bigger trucking, bigger enterprises. And so he had all the contacts, and he had $1 million phone voice on him, and he remembered everybody who he'd ever talked to. So he took over all the dispatching and wrangling all the trucks, and I took over. I basically put the trucks together, financed them, got all the other insurance. I did all that work, and he concentrated on just getting the loads, wrangling with truck drivers, and selling the freight business. So him and I had a great partnership for 30 years. I don't think we ever argued about anything, but we never got in each other's way because I didn't ever want to dispatch and
So he took care of lining up customers?
yeah, and the freight. Yeah, customers, freight, brokered freight,
Yeah.
wrangled the truck drivers, the day-to-day, picking up the phone, knowing where everybody's at, And my job was, he'd say, "Hey, we got this business going on. We're going to need 5 more trucks to do that with. We're going to need
Yeah.
this many more tanks." And then, so I ran the shop end of things. And he basically provided all the...
You're talking in the
dispatch.
past tense. It's still going that same way, isn't it?
Well, Mike and I are pretty much out of doing that anymore. We're still here, but we don't. So I have 2 boys, Josh and Gabe, which both of them are in their 40s, and basically they run the show now. And Mike and I are just here to tell them what not to do. We don't really
How many employees do you or your boys have?
somewhere around 300 right now.
Wow.
Employees was your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a place here and another place in Sioux City. And the place in Sioux City basically is just like this place. It's somewhat smaller, but yeah. And we have a rail yard up there where we basically transload freight from rail to truck up there and do some unique things. So the wash bays are what really made the company unique. So at first it started out where we were hauling cattle feed, and no one really cared whether the trucks on the inside, the tanks were that clean or not. They didn't care. So they would load molasses and feed from all over the country, and no one really requested a washout until mad cow disease came out.
Oh.
Now they wanted to have somebody washed out, and they wanted to have a certified washout, which meant you had to hold it at a certain temperature, and you had to have all these records. So now it's like, uh-oh, what are we going to do now? So I came out here and bought this place and, you know, built a giant wash bay and
Where were you working from before you bought this area here?
we were working right out of the salvage yard, Sharpstone.
Oh, clear down there still,
Yeah.
okay.
And so then came out here and built the first wash bay and started making all the tickets and getting that functioning correct. And
Now it's a big
now,
part of the business.
so then everybody had to start doing the same thing. So all truckers that wanted to haul freight anywhere had to have a certified wash ticket. So then we just basically opened the business up to anybody. So we not only washed our trucks out, we washed everybody else's trucks out in this area. And so that basically, it built a moat around the business where it cut off all the competition because no one's gonna go out here and spend the kind of money that we spent to build these wash bays. Because you're just not gonna enter that business easily.
Yeah,
Tell them about the digester, building a digester.
So then, you know, then we're using, at that time, we just had a lined lagoon out here. Well, as the business grew, so did the water consumption grew. And it's not the washing out of the trucks that cost all the money, it's getting rid of the wastewater.
yeah.
So then, you know, I had to go to the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality and get all this stuff certified. So, you know, I had to hire an engineer, said what we needed to do, sold it to the city of Plattsmouth, because now we don't have a way to dispose of the water. The only way that can be done is putting a pipeline in from out here into town.
All the way to town, yeah.
So that was a couple mile pipeline to put in. And so we created these giant digesters down here. And basically, all the wastewater goes into a digester, and it's in 3 different stages. So the detention time that it takes for this water to get clean enough to send it to town is about 28 days. So we have to have that much retention time